Hello, I'm Michelle and welcome to Somewhere in Bookland. Today I'm going to be doing my June and July wrap-up, otherwise known as my summer wrap-up, otherwise known as my oh my gosh Michelle, could you read any more ebooks wrap-up. In the month of June and July I read 14 books and 9 of them were ebooks. 9. Well, technically 8 because one of them was an audiobook. It's not as bad, right? 9 of those books I read in June, 5 of those books I read in July. I was doing the O.W.L.s readathon in July. All 5 of the books I read in July did count for my O.W.L.s readathon. I did the Biannual Bibliothon in July. 2 of the books counted for my Biannual Bibliothon. I also did a 24 and 48 readathon where I read 2 of the books in that. Out of the 14 books, 6 of them were 5 stars, 4 of them were 4 stars, 2 of them were 3.5 stars, and 2 of them were 3 stars. So it wasn't that bad of a reading. Summer. The first book I read in the month of June was Lost by Zarita Cordova. This book is about this girl Alex who's a bruja and grew up in a family of brujas, and she doesn't want her magic. On her death day celebration, she performs a spell to rid herself of her magic and instead rids herself of her entire family. I did go into more detail about this book and its sequel, Bruja Born, in my June favorites, so I'll link that video in case you want to see more on that. But I really did enjoy this book. This book was one of my 5-star reads. I loved the world and I loved the magic, and I loved that the main character was a strong bisexual Latinx woman because yes, I loved her family and I loved that we got to see her family. I wished we got to see her family more, but it's understandable based on the plot that we did not get to see her family more. I loved the setting of this book, especially Los Lagos, because it's such an interesting place. And yes, I just loved this book. 5 stars. The next book I read was my first ebook in a long list of ebooks, and that is From Twinkle with Love by Sandhya Menon, and I received an ARC of this book from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. This book is about this girl, Twinkle, who's an aspiring filmmaker, and she gets approached by a fellow student to help make a film for a student film festival. Little does he know that she has a crush on his twin brother, and things are about to get a little complicated. Now, this book I gave 3.5 stars. It's a really cute contemporary read, and Twinkle is so relatable in the aspect that she cannot understand or comprehend when somebody likes her. Like, it completely goes over her head, just as her crush is completely oblivious to the fact that she likes him. Now, this book relies on quite a bit of tropes, which isn't a problem in and of itself because I don't really mind tropes a whole bunch, but I found this book to be highly predictable, and that's kind of what put me off of it a little bit. Also, Maddie, who is Twinkle's best friend, kind of puts me off a little bit too, because while she still claims that she's Twinkle's friend, we don't really see her acting like it. Now, naturally, Twinkle was upset about this, and at first I really felt sorry for her, but then something kind of switches and I stopped feeling sorry for her and just started getting annoyed with her, which I felt bad about. So overall, this book wasn't my favorite read, but I still think it is worth picking up and giving a chance. So the next book I read was also a NetGalley ARC, and that is Bruja Born by Zarita Cordova. And like I said, for Lost, I did talk a little more about these in my June favorites. Now, this book I did give 5 stars because I really enjoyed it, but I was kind of on the edge of giving it 4.5 stars or 4 stars. But I ended up going with 5. I don't know if I'm going to stick with that. I might drop it down to 4.5 stars. Because while I really did enjoy this book, I didn't like it quite as much as the first one. So Bruja Born follows one of Alex's sisters from Lost, specifically her older sister, Lula. Now Lula's a little hurt, kind of jealous, I feel like, of Alex's powers, and then something happens, but I can't go into super a lot of detail because while it isn't necessarily a direct sequel, it's kind of a companion. It's also a sequel because it happens directly after the events in the first book. So like I said, I didn't quite like this book as much as the first book, but I do like the fact that we get to explore more the relationship between the three sisters, especially now dealing with the aftermath of what had happened in the first book. Now, without really spoiling anything that had happened in the first book, Bruja Born does follow Lula trying to use her magic to save someone's life and discovering the consequences of doing that. I do feel like this book was a lot darker than the first book, Labyrinth Lost. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I just do feel like it was darker. And we also see the whole family just dealing with what had happened in the first book, in the end of the first book. Just dealing with that remaining trauma and coming to grips with who they are after the events of the first book. So yes, I gave that one 5 stars. The next book I read was also a NetGalley arc, and it's called Playing Her Secret Crush by Cassie Griffin, and I gave this book a 3.5 stars. This book is about this girl Katie who's always been chosen last for everything. Even her secret crush, her best friend Alex, has friend-zoned her. Katie is determined to fix that, but then Alex asks her to help him find a date. And I think we know what happens from here. I tend to really enjoy the trope of helping someone find a date and, you know, feelings grow. And this book wasn't that bad. I did give this book a 3.5 stars due to something else in the book that kind of threw me off a bit. This book is a really cute contemporary read about falling for your best friend and how that changes everything, which it does. Now this book in particular does have a unique aspect in that it revolves around a professional gaming event that Katie, the main girl, and Alex, the main boy, have been trying to go compete at for a while now. Now, they've been best friends for years, secret crushes exist, but Alex is harboring this loyalty for his brother and nothing can happen between these two. Like I said, I really enjoy the trope of falling for your best friend and having to help them find a date, and I feel like this book pulled it off in a really cute way. I also thought the gaming part was unique and fun. I mean, obviously this book was a bit predictable, which I wasn't super surprised at, but there was something, like I said, that kind of just threw me off. Now, I'm not sure if this is a spoiler. I feel like it is, but it shouldn't be. But it is. I don't know. The thing that threw me off, like, if I say it, it will spoil a plot. But I feel like it shouldn't be something that I can't talk about or it'll spoil. I did write a review for this on Goodreads, and I marked it as a spoiler review, so you can go check it if you want. I'll leave the link down below. But warning, I put a warning before the spoiler. I marked the whole review as a spoiler review just in case. I don't want somebody to get mad saying I spoiled it. But like I said, it shouldn't be something that is a spoiler. Personally, to me, I saw it coming, but also, even though I was seeing what they were setting up, I don't know about this book. The next book I read was another 5-star read and another ebook, and that was Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. Now, I checked this ebook out from my library, and I thought I was gonna cry, but boy did I severely underestimate how much I was gonna cry. Like, severely. This book is about this girl Myra, whose friend Hannah accuses Myra's twin brother Owen of raping her. Myra doesn't know how to feel. Does she believe her brother and side with him, or does she believe her friend and side with her? And if she believes her friend, how can she live with knowing what she knows about her brother? I went into this book, like I said, expecting it to be a tough book and expecting to cry. I didn't know much about this book aside from that. I didn't know that Myra was bisexual, which is awesome. But I didn't know any of that. I didn't know just how much she was dealing with the effects of what had happened in relation to other areas in her life and other things that have happened. And I cried so much during this book. Like I said, I knew going into it that it dealt with a highly emotional and sensitive subject, but it just pulled at my heartstrings, and I would recommend anybody read this book. Like, I'm just crying thinking about it almost. But yes, 5 stars. Definitely recommend it. If you haven't read it yet, you should go read it. Really good book. The next book I read, book number 6 in the month of June, was also another library ebook, and that is Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, which I also gave a 5 stars to. Now, Undead Girl Gang is about this girl Mila and her friend Riley, and shh, but they're witches. They're always together, always a pair, but then something happened and Riley and 2 other girls from her school die. Everybody's calling it a suicide pact, but Mila knows that Riley would not do that. So she makes it her mission to bring Riley back and solve her murder. Unfortunately, they all come back. That's really where her story begins. Going into this book, I honestly wasn't expecting to like it quite as much as I did, but I was very, very pleasantly surprised. I laughed a lot in this book. Also, they're like zombies. I was expecting coming back all nice and neat, and they're zombies. Zombies! Also, they're Gatorade loving zombies. I love that it was a very like unique plot, and you could tell I did not predict the ending to this one at all. Pleasantly surprised. Highly recommend. 5 stars. That reminds me, I don't know if anybody's ever seen Superstar, but that reminds me of when she's just like this, and then she's like, yeah. Anyways, the 7th book I read in the month of June was my audiobook, and that is Egomaniac by Vi Keeland, and I gave this one 3 stars. This one follows this girl Emery and this guy Drew. She rents out an office in New York, but turns out that the person she rented it from wasn't the person who should have been renting it out, because they rented out somebody else's office. And meet Drew. He's the guy who really owns the office, and he did not rent it to her. He walks into his office, she thinks that somebody's breaking in and threatens to call the cops, and he's like, go ahead, you broke in, let them come. They end up figuring out what happened. She feels ashamed and horrible, and now she has to find a new office, and he says, you know what, my assistant's gone for a while, stay here, help me answer a couple calls. He's a divorce lawyer, and you can use this office for your job while you're here. She's a marriage counselor. They butt heads a lot. They fight a lot. It wasn't bad. A lot of people very much like this book. I don't know if it's because I was listening to it instead of reading it, and I've never really listened to a romance books before. I usually listen to more of fantasy books or nonfiction books, but I didn't feel a connection to the characters at all, and it took me just a really long time to get through. Like, I felt like this book was the book that never ended, and I cannot in good conscience rate it high rating. Like I said, it wasn't bad, it was just like meh, but hurry up and get over already. So yes. The 8th book I read in the month of June was Kim Reaper, Volume 1, Grim Beginnings by Sarah Graylie. Now I read this one on Comixology, so yes, it was an e-version as well. This book follows this girl, Becca, who has a big crush on Kim, who happens to be a part-time Grim Reaper. What? It's cute. It's a quick read. I've seen people call it juvenile. Kind of. It's not like a deep comic. But like I said, it's cute. It's a quick read. Nothing really wrong with it. The last book I read in the month of June was actually a reread, and that is Amor Amor by Krista and Becca Ritchie, and I gave this one a 4 stars. 4. Now, Amor Amor is the first book in the Aerial Ethereal series by Krista and Becca Ritchie, and it follows people in like a Cirque du Soleil type circus. How cool is that? Now, there's only 2 books in the series, and yes, I have read them both. This one is the first book, and it follows 21-year-old Thora, who leaves her school, leaves her home, and travels to Vegas to try out for Amor, the new aerial show in Vegas. There she meets Amor's leading performer, Nikolai, and sparks fly. Now, I wanted to reread this book because I wanted something that I knew I was going to enjoy, and I do enjoy this book so much. And it goes into like the working out and the dancing and the romance, and Nikolai has like a huge family, and I just love this book, okay? This one and the second one, but the first one's my favorite, and I loved it, so I wanted to reread it, and that's the last book I read in the month of June. Okay. So now I'm going to get on to my 5 books I read in the month of July. I was doing the O.W.L.s readathon in the month of July, and I only managed to read 5 books, and all 5 books were on my O.W.L.s, not on my O.W.L.s TBR actually, but they ended up fitting into my O.W.L.s readathon. I don't know if any of them were on my O.W.L.s TBR. I don't think a lot of them were, to be honest. I didn't start reading until the Biannual Bibliothon, which was in the middle of July, so I read nothing for like the first 2 weeks, read 4 books one week, another book the next week, and then nothing until the end of the month, because then I started the booktubeathon and I didn't read anything until August started. So yes, I didn't read a lot this month, but I got 5 books done, so I'm not angry. I'm not. Now in July, 4 of those books were physical copies. Now, the first book that I read in the month of June, which was the first book for the O.W.L.s readathon and the first book for the Biannual Bibliothon, and that was Grace and the Fever by Zan Romanoff. And for the O.W.L.s, this counted as Defense Against the Dark Arts, or features secret societies and clubs, because I feel like this is a stretch, I will admit, but I feel like fandoms are kind of secret societies and clubs that not everybody's a part of. And this book has fandoms in it. It was also the first book I read for the Biannual Bibliothon, which was The Last Book You Bought. So this was this book. Now, this book is about this girl, Grace, who is obsessed with this band, Fever Dream, and she has a fan Tumblr on them, and events happen. She ends up befriending this band, and she sees what's behind the scene, like on the other side, and it's just crazy. Now, I gave this book a 3 stars, mainly because I felt super anxious reading this book the whole time I was reading it, because at the beginning of the book she tells him she's not really that huge of a fan, and they don't know about her secret fan Tumblr, and they don't know that she's posting some of the stuff she's learning about them on her Tumblr. And I was just like, girl, you need to stop, you're gonna get caught, you need to stop doing this. And I just felt anxious for her. Plus, I felt like a little bit like, I felt like a little bit like they were talking about me, but not really. Like, I don't have a fan Tumblr or anything like that for any bands, but they mentioned this thing about like getting band tattoos, and I have a tattoo for my favorite band, and I was just like, you know what, Grace Nerve Fever, at me next time. Like, I don't need you coming at me like this. I have an all-time low tattoo. I do. So, like, 3 stars. Like I said, it wasn't bad. It was okay. It was good. I just felt like a little like, but the main thing was like the anxiety reading this book. Like, I had to set this book down so many times because I was getting itchy, like, because I was so anxious for her, and I cannot deal with that. Now, the next book I read was also for the Biannual Bibliothon / the O.W.L.s, and that was the Biannual Bibliothon group book, The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. I had also used this for predicted 5-star read because I thought I was really gonna like this book, and that means I hit 3 challenges of the 7 challenges on the Biannual Bibliothon with 2 books. So I only hit 3 out of 7. That's not a passing grade. That's not. That's enough. It's okay. But what's not okay is this was a predicted 5-star read and it was only 4 stars. That is not okay. Now, for the O.W.L.s readathon, I used this book as the Ancient Runes challenge, and that is to read a book with a symbol on the cover because symbol. Duh. So, this book is about this town sparrow, and every year these 3 sisters come back from the dead, inhabit 3 girls' bodies, and entice boys to their death, drowning in the sea because they were drowned for witches when they were younger. What? This book follows the main perspective of this girl, Penny, and we kind of just see how she reacts to this every year, and I liked it. It was really good. It wasn't 5-star good, but it was good. I loved the creepiness of it. I loved that there was something that I did not predict at all, which I should have predicted because I'm normally pretty good at predicting stuff, but this time I did not. But like I said, I really enjoyed the setting because the town was just so spooky, and there's like music, and whenever you hear the music, then you know that they're out there, the spirits are out looking for people to inhabit. And yes, I just love this book. The romance wasn't my favorite. It was kind of boring, and then it just got kind of weird at the end. So yes, not 5 stars, but 4 stars. It was good. I like to kind of have like a couple of key talking points of my like feelings on the books, and for these last couple of books, like the July books, I didn't do that, and yeah, I'm feeling the pressure on that right now because I can't come up with stuff off the top of my head. I'm not like off the top of your head by the collar of your shirt type of person. I don't know if that's a saying. From off the cuff, is that what you say? I can't, off the cuff. I think that's what the saying is, not from the collar of your shirt. What the heck? Anyways, the next book I read right after Biannual Bibliothon, there was the 24 and 48 readathon, and so I read 2 books during that. Yes, in 2 days I read the same amount of books I read in 7. Interesting, Michelle. One of them was a really thin book, so I feel a little bit like cheating, but the next book I read was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. Now, this one is part of the Wayward Children series. It's number 2, and this one follows Jack and Jill. Yes, Jack and Jill. They did not fall down a hill. Well, think they actually do. Anyways, this book follows Jack and Jill as they go into this world where it's like dark and there are choices they have to make once they get there, and you see Jack and Jill in the first book and they're completely different in this book because it's you see them before they go to their world and become like who they truly are, and in the first book it's after they already came back and are who they are, if that makes any sense at all. But I enjoyed this book so much more than the first one. I think because you actually get to see the worlds that they're in more, when in the first book they were already kind of back from the worlds, living in the regular world, and while you saw mentions of the worlds, you didn't really get into the world, and this one was good. And I gave it 5 stars. Sorry, I'm getting a little sleepy. Sleepy, 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 sleepy. For the O.W.L.s readathon, I use this book for herbology or to read a book with a nature-related word in the title because sticks and bones. Very nature-related. Sticks and bones. Now, the next book I read in the month of July is an ebook, and it was from the library, and it is another 5-star read, and I loved it. And that is Brightly Burning by Alexa Dunn, and it is a retelling of Jane Eyre in space. I've seen the movie Jane Eyre. I think, is there a movie Jane Eyre? Am I confusing it this whole time with something else? I'm pretty sure there's a Jane Eyre movie and I'm pretty sure I've seen it, but I didn't remember it. So people kept saying it's Jane Eyre in space, and all I heard was in space because I have no context for the Jane Eyre. But this book was so good. It was so much better than I thought it would be, and oh my gosh. It follows this girl, Stella, who wants to get off of the spaceship that she's on, where she's like an engineer apprentice slash part-time teacher, and she applies to be a governess on another ship, on a private ship, and she gets it, and she goes onto the ship, and it's the Rochester, and there's this Captain Hugo who's like mysterious, but there's all these secrets on the Rochester, and Stella's pretty sure someone's trying to kill Hugo, the captain, and it was just really good. I really enjoyed it. I loved the mystery aspect of it, although it was a bit predictable, and you're probably like, of course it's predictable, it's a Jane Eyre retelling. I don't know Jane Eyre, so I didn't have that reference. Well, I don't know if I know Jane Eyre, but I didn't have that reference. It was just predictable even without knowing that, but I love it. In space. Oh, good. Good, good, good. I loved the characters. I loved the mystery. I loved the plot. I just loved this book. Loved it. Now, this was the last book I read in the 24 and 48 readathon, and I used it to complete the astronomy challenge and the O.W.L.s challenge, and that was to read a sci-fi book because space. So good. Let's get on to the last book I read in the month of July. The last book I read in the month of July counts towards the Transfiguration O.W.L.s challenge. It is to read a book featuring transfiguration or shapeshifting, or that has a cat on the cover, and I read The Shadow Queen by C.J. Redwine because it has dragons. I didn't know that going into this book. I just knew I wanted to read it, and then I was gonna use it for something else. I think, I'm not sure. It wasn't even a fit for anything. Maybe, I'm not sure, but then I was reading it and I was like, they're dragons! And they're not always dragons, they're humans, and they transform or shape-shift into dragons. Yay! Now, this book is not what I thought it was, like at all. I gave this book 4 stars I thought it was just like a simple retelling of Snow White, but it is so much more. I was going to read this book for the Biannual Bibliothon because it was the book that I read a chapter and chose, and that chapter was like so gory. If you want to see my reactions to like after I read the first chapter, I will link the TBR video for the O.W.L.s readathon. But I read the first chapter and I was like, I need to read this book. It sounds so much gorier and better and darker than I thought it would. It's about this girl Lorelai, this princess Lorelai, who needs to steal her throne back from the evil queen in Ravenspire. And the evil queen is obviously her stepmom, because it is a Snow White retelling, but not like strictly. Because last I checked, Snow White does not have dragons. Now, there's a neighboring kingdom elder who is also having problems of their own, and they need help. Enter the dragons. So, sorry, I'm getting sleepy, and when I get sleepy, I think everything is funny, including me, but mostly me. So, yes, dragons in this book, and amazing dragons, and I can't even think right now. But yes, 4 stars. It was a fantasy book I didn't know I needed to read until I read it, and then I bought the next 2 books in the series, because that's what I do. But dragons, magic, death, revenge, overcoming, getting to know yourself, love. It's got everything, man. So yes, those are the books that I read in the month of June and July, in the months of June and July, in these summer months. These are the books I read. And a lot of audiobooks. A lot. If you want to see more of this face in your feed, click subscribe. If you liked the video, click like. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.